In this video, you will learn how to solve quadratic equations. In general, you want your equation to equal 0. There are several methods you could use to solve. In this lesson, I will focus on factoring and the square root method. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a couple of examples on the board. For number 1, I have x squared minus 36 equals 0. There's two ways you could solve this. You could use the square root property, which would mean that I would need to move the 36 to the other side, or I could just factor. I'm going to go ahead and factor. This is a difference of 2 squared. We factor it by getting the square root of the first term and getting the square root of the second term. One set of your parentheses will be plus and the other will be minus. So the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 36 is 6. I'll make my first one minus. It doesn't matter which one you make a minus. And then the second one will be a plus equal 0. Next, I need to separate these and make them into equations. So I have x minus 6 equals 0, x plus 6 equals 0. Now I just need to solve this. For this one, we would add 6 to the other side, and you will get x equals 6. For this one, you would subtract 6, and you'll get x equals negative 6. For the second example, this is not a difference of 2 squares because I can't get the perfect square root of that. So I would want to use the square root property on this. The square root property works well when it's a binomial or when you have an equation that has just 2 terms. So first thing I want to do is move this negative 20 to the other side by adding 20 on both sides. So that's gone. Now I have 2x squared equals 20. Then you want to get rid of this 2 by dividing by 2. So you want to completely isolate that x squared to get it completely by itself. 20 divided by 2 is 10. Once the variable is completely by itself, to undo an exponent, you would get the root of it. So the opposite of a squared is a square root. So I want to square root this side and square root that side. Every time you get a square root when you're solving an equation, this will be plus and minus square root of 10. So the answer here would be square root of 10 and negative square root of 10. For my third example, I have a trinomial. So the first thing you want to do is make it equal 0. So I'm going to move this negative 6 to this side by adding 6. So I have x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. The reason I want to do that is I would like to factor it, and you can't factor unless it equals 0. So to factor this trinomial, I need to look for 2 terms whose product is 6, and those 2 terms that I add, those 2 numbers that I add, I need to get negative 5. So that would be negative 3 and negative 2. Negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. Negative 3 plus negative 2 is a negative 5, so I'm ready to factor. Just plug those into parentheses. Doesn't matter which one you do first. Then I'm going to split these up and make equations out of them. And then I will just solve it. Add 2 to get x equals 2.